Okay, here's how to use the Dropbox in D2L. Now, the Dropbox tool is used most often when you have your students prepare written work and submit it to you, the instructor, to be evaluated. The most common use case of this is they have an essay or a paper that they type it out in Microsoft Word, save it to their computer, and then upload it here into the Dropbox portion of the course. It's a handy tool because it organizes the assignments for you, and if you go into a folder that you've made in the Dropbox, it'll list your students and show you the paper that they sent. So really makes it easy to stay organized, much better than having them email things to you. It can also accept things like PowerPoint files, um, Excel files, things like that. So a lot of basically any type of digital work that they've done, images in some of our art classes. It'll take scans and JPEGs. Another thing to remember about the Dropbox is that submissions to the Dropbox are visible only to the professor. There is no way to flip this around and make it so that students can see each other's work. If it's the kind of thing where you want them to be able to view each other's papers, then you would use the discussions for that instead. So anything a student sends into the Dropbox can only be viewed by the professor, no one else. So to set this up and begin using it, what I do is come into the Dropbox portion of the course, click New Folder, and here where it says Name, as you saw earlier, you name these folders according to the assignment. So maybe this is going to be Quick Write 4. Down here below in the instructions box, this is where you can provide them with the prompt. So that usually includes how much to write, what to write about, how many things they need to cite, stuff like that. Questions students typically have. So in this case, I'll put in the let's write about you don't necessarily have to use this. If you have the prompt elsewhere in the course, you might have it in the content or the syllabus. This is where you basically put either give them the prompt or put a note on where to find the prompt of what to write about in the instructions. Down here below, a lot of this other stuff you can skip. There is a tool I'll mention fast. If you have your students doing things in groups, where they're writing a paper together as a team, you can set this up to be a group Dropbox folder. This assumes that you've defined your groups up here in the groups tool. And if you set this to be a group assignment, instead of coming into the folder and seeing names, you'll see group 1, group 2, group 3, and you evaluate the paper and it sends the same score to everybody in the group. So this is very handy if you're doing something like that. In the video about groups, I go into more details. But if every student's writing their own paper, I'll leave it here as individual. Another thing to watch out about under where it says submission type, leave this as file submission. What that means is that they're typing up a document, they're preparing a file for you, whether that's a Word document, a PowerPoint, and uploading it to D2L. Sometimes people will find this and flip it to text, thinking, oh, they're writing text and they're sending it to me. But what this does is this, rather than prompting the student to attach a file to submit, it gives them a big text box in their web browser that it assumes that they're going to type in. And they say, well, I know I want to attach my Word document. How do I do that? And they can't. So leave this as file. Most of the time, that's the one you want. The other options in there are very rarely used. Files per submission, we keep these as unlimited and all submissions are kept. I would recommend leaving this as is. What unlimited means is that if they submit a paper and the deadline hasn't hit yet and they decided they want to revise it some more, it'll let them submit another paper. And it'll mark it for you, which was the most current one. So this is handy if they found a typo and they want to send up the new version and the deadline hasn't hit yet. Leave this as unlimited. That way they can do that. Otherwise, you might get emails from students, complaining about it. And this just means all submissions are kept. There's another reason to leave this alone if it's a multi-part project where they're going to submit several things to you and you're going to produce one grade for it. Rest of this stuff, these are rarely used. The next thing to watch out for is score out of and grade items. So it's going to ask you, okay, when you go to grade these, how much is this assignment worth? So you would put that in here. And then below, for grade item, if you pop this down, assuming you've already built out your grade book, which we recommend, build your grade book first, it'll show you what's in your grade book, and it will let you match it to that assignment. So I've already built up my grade book for Quick Write 3 worth 10 points. If I set this, this will interface with the grade book. So when I view the papers in the Dropbox, it'll let me type in a score, and type in feedback comments. It'll send those to the grade book and update the student scores instantly. Another thing to watch out for is make sure it matches. I'm setting up Quick Write 4 and I accidentally chose Quick Write 3, so careful with that. Make sure these are matching or consistently named. Don't crisscross the grade item with the name of the assignment. The electronic rubrics are handy. I have a separate video about that. If you've built rubrics in the rubrics tool, you can associate it here. And down here below, the other thing I'll mention real fast is this anonymous marking thing. Was a good idea on D2L's part, so when you go in to view the submissions, it doesn't show you the names of the students, and that helps you if you want to be impartial when you grade. It'll just show you the paper they submitted, but when you grade it, it'll send it to the grade book and put it under the student's name. This only works if you tell the students not to type their name at the top of the paper. So good idea you might want to use, but to make use of this, you have to tell your students don't type your name at the top or put your name in the file. So there are some caveats to that. Otherwise, I filled out these things. The next thing you'll want to check out is under the restrictions tab. This is where you can set a due date or an end date. I've mentioned this in other videos. There is no reason at all to set the same day and the same time under due date and end date. Due date is a soft deadline, so if 6/5/2020 passes and it's the next day, it'll still let the student submit. Usually you don't want to do that unless you have a policy, you know, every day late is a letter grade off, things like that. End date is a hard deadline where you will absolutely not accept the paper after that day. You could do them both if you maybe had this staggered. So maybe like 6/8 is the hard deadline, but the 5th is the due date. So maybe they get points off until this day and then they can no longer submit. But you do not have to pick both and put the same date in both. And down here below, special access exists also. If you have students who have an extended deadline, you can set that there. I'll mention real fast, the Dropbox is where Turnitin lives, and that is the plagiarism checker. It scans all the papers against each other. If you think you want to use that, you come into this tab and check these two boxes. You must check these boxes from the get-go. You can't do Turnitin retroactively, unfortunately. So if you think you want to use Turnitin, come in here and check these. And it'll show you their originality score next to the paper when you go to view them. So I'm going to save and close this. My Dropbox is set up. In another web browser here, I have signed into the same course a student. So I'm going to show from his point of view, all he has to do is go to his Dropbox folder, click on Quick Write 4 that I just created. It tells him he hasn't submitted it yet. It tells him the due date, tells him it's worth 10 points. If he clicks on that, he sees that prompt I wrote. Then he can click Add a File, My Computer, Upload, and we'll pretend this is his paper. He clicks Add. The comment box, students will put, you know, please grade this one. That you know, if he uploaded more than one, you could tell him, you know, I made some changes. You'll typically see things like that. Student submits. This student will get an email saying that it's been received, confirmation email sent, and when he clicks done, Quick Write 4 tells him you have one submission sent in, and it reminds him of that. So for you, I'm going to switch my web browser again. If I refresh the Dropbox folder, Quick Write 4, it's telling me you have one new submission to look at, to evaluate. If I click on it, There's the student. There's the note he wrote me. If I go across and I hit evaluate and I click on the name of his paper, there's the paper he sent me. Now this isn't Word, so I can't type in here, but on the right here, after I've read it, I can type his score in this box. And in this box here, I can type feedback. So this was good, better word choice and flow. You can type as much as you want in here. You can add a file back to the student if you want. So what some folks will do is they'll hit download here, download a copy of the paper, use track changes in Word or comment bubbles, resave it and click add a file to send a marked up copy back to the student. That's an option for you. But if it's something short and light, you can just read it in the web browser, give a score, type them a note, and then hit publish. And what that does is that sends that score to the gradebook. And from here, if I click next up here, this takes me to the next student in the lineup of papers that have been submitted, and I can just work my way through like that. This isn't a great example because I only have one person in here, but now it says it's been published on May 29. If I flip my web browser back one more time to the student's view, if I refresh his Dropbox, it says here's your score now, and here's the feedback. If he clicks that, there's the note I wrote to him, and if the student goes to his grades, there's feedback there. Quick write 4, 9.5. Well, it's worth 100 points in the grade book, and there's that note again. So that is a quick view of